Pennsylvania's Auditor General reiterating just days ago that the state's foster care system is broken, a system designed to protect our most vulnerable, putting them at risk of abuse and sometimes even death.
Right now, there are about 15,000 kids in foster care here in the state. CBS 21's Brian Sheehan joins us as we launch a new initiative called Project PA, Children in Crisis. Brian.
It is our commitment to you, to the children and families in this community, to uncover and figure out how to fix a broken system. We begin with a disturbing story of a young girl in the system and her life of abuse. This story has graphic details and may not be appropriate for some.
I have no purpose of life right now. I'm just here. I walk around numb. I feel like I have no purpose on this earth. I know I got kids out there, but I feel like my one little girl was robbed from me, so why would the other ones want me?
Montgomery County, 2001. Young mother Rose Hunsaker and her husband Rodney are raising their two girls, a 3-year-old and a newborn, in a home in Norristown they share with several members of Rose's family. Life is going seemingly well, despite Rose's mental health challenges from a 1997 brain injury. Its effects still slightly visible, even today.
I couldn't ask for a better life. I had my 2 girls. I had everything.
Those 2 girls, 3-year-old Mary Beth, newborn Susan.
She was just the most bundleless little thing when she was born. And she was so tiny, but she was like a bundle of joy.
Who would later be renamed Grace Packer.
I would thought she was always growing to be a beautiful little girl.
Officials say Grace was raped and murdered by her adoptive mother and the mother's boyfriend.
The Richland Township pair are both accused of beating, raping, torturing, killing, and then dismembering the body.
The system failed my children, my daughter, all the way around.
The Hunsakers' nightmare began 12 years prior. Shortly after they moved from Norristown to Reading, Children and Youth Services removed the girls from the home, citing allegations of neglect from an unnamed source.
I was like, what's the cause of you taking my kids? And that's when they said that there was allegations that there was sexually abused. Your girls would be sexually abused and you did do nothing about it.
This gives you some facts of...
Norristown-based attorney David Tornetta handled about 100 custody cases in his more than 30-year experience. He represented the family for several years.
The allegations just became unbelievable. Like, they allowed the kids to be subject to sexual abuse. They allowed the kids to be abused. Not Rose and Rodney were being alleged to have done that, but other family members. The other family members weren't even living there.
Tornetta says the allegations were unfounded, meaning no one was charged with any crimes. But CYS requested the Hunsakers to pass a series of tasks before getting their kids back.
If they would have told me to jump through fire for my girls, I would have jumped through that fire.
It's my understanding that Rose and Rodney fulfilled everything that was asked of them, completed it successfully.
But Berks County Children and Youth decided to terminate their parental rights for the 2 girls and the Hunsakers' baby boy, torn from Rose's arms shortly after she gave birth, while the abuse investigation continued.
It was my opinion after that trial and that hearing that it was an abuse of discretion of the judge, an abuse of power of Berks County Children and Youth.
I think when CYS takes a child, they already have it in their mind that that child ain't coming back to the parent.
In March 2007, the state gave social worker Sarah Packer and her husband David the opportunity to become parents to 5-year-old Susan and baby boy Rodney Jr. Susan's name changed to Grace. Rodney Jr.'s name was changed as well.
I thought Sarah was a good person because she already has a history of working with CYS.
But the Packers would soon find themselves at the center of their own CYS investigation. In 2011, David pleaded guilty to sexually assaulting Grace. He was sentenced to prison and forced to register as a sexually violent predator under Megan's Law.
It was just horrible the way my little girl had to live and was never removed from the home. Never.
In July, Sarah Packer reported Grace missing from their home in Montgomery County. Then months later, the unthinkable. Human remains discovered in the woods in Luzerne County. They're later identified as Grace Packer, her adoptive mother, and her mother's new boyfriend, Jacob Sullivan, charged with her death. The Bucks County District Attorney says Packer and Sullivan kidnapped Grace, taking her from their Montgomery County home to a rental property in Richland Township, Bucks County. There, it's alleged Sullivan beat and raped her while Sarah watched. Court records alleged they drugged her and left her alone in a hot attic, hoping the extreme conditions would kill her. But it didn't. So they returned the next day. That's when it's alleged Sullivan strangled her, ultimately, prosecutors say, killing the 14-year-old defenseless Grace.
After he killed her, then he put her in the closet with cat litter over her. And then they lived in the house.
They lived there for several months, prosecutors say, while Grace's body was left to rot upstairs. Then in October, fearing the authorities were onto them, police say Packer and Sullivan dismembered her body in a downstairs bathtub and drove them to rural northeastern Pennsylvania, where hunters discovered her remains on Halloween.
I just wish I could have done more.
I am the mother that should have been there. These are monsters. I'm her mother. Her life was robbed from her, very much.
What a story, Brian. What's next?
Well, over the coming days and weeks, we'll take a look at the laws currently in place and whether they were applied the right way in this case. The system could be failing your child or a child you love as well. So this is Project PA, Children in Crisis. And we know Grace and the Hunsikers aren't alone. So we are committed to telling your stories as well to help uncover the truth and ultimately help fix this broken system. We have a hotline already set up. You can call 717-857-3613. You can also learn more by going to CBS21.com and looking in the Project PA section.
Thank you, Brian.
Brian,
for that
thank
report.
you. And for starting the initiative. Since launching Project PA earlier this year, we've received countless calls from you, our viewers, who want to share their stories.
That's right, and tonight we introduce you to the Bolzans, a family who moved to Pennsylvania to get treatment for their teenage son. Now, they claim that they're caught in a medical nightmare and fear children and youth could take away custody of their son. Here's Brian Sheehan.
In October of last year, Connie and Ray Bolzan uprooted their family from New Jersey and settled here in York County. We met them on two separate occasions over the course of the past 2.5 months.
We thought we were doing the right thing for Alex so that he can start making the progress that the area of New Jersey we were living in didn't afford him.
It was Connie's idea to move here, but she says that idea and ultimate decision turned their lives into a living hell.
An absolute nightmare, the worst decision, the worst thought I ever presented to my family.
That's because the Bolzans fear Alex won't be with them for much longer.
York County Children and Youth have found that we are child abusers before there's even a final outcome of anything, and they have put us on the Pennsylvania State Registry now.
What are you doing there?
This is Alex.
Good.
Alex was diagnosed with autism when he was about 27 months old.
Now 16, he also suffers from a long and well-documented list of medical conditions. Yeah, how you doing?
Good.
Good. The Bolzans have been under investigation by York County Children and Youth since February. Alex had been at a local hospital for about a month and a half at that point. He was weak, couldn't walk, and wasn't appearing to gain weight, even though he had a feeding tube.
And I just kept saying, well, where's the diagnosis? What are we doing? He's laying here in bed. I could do this at home, let him lay in bed.
Connie says the hospital couldn't come up with a concrete diagnosis, but her mother's instinct told her something else was going on, so she called in a second opinion.
We asked to see specialists for our son just to get an opinion, because now we're like, we still don't have an answer. What's going on? And I was presented with a behavior agreement.
A behavior agreement is a form that, if Connie signed, would give the hospital control over Alex's treatment plan. But she didn't sign the form and says that's when she thinks someone made that initial call to Children and Youth Services.
You take your child in for health care and they turn things around, and next thing you know, you're being investigated.
This is out of it's Children Youth Services. Right. I have a paper here for Alexander.
Connie captured the moment the county constable served them with the papers weeks after the investigation got underway.
We were charged with, someone phoned in, malnutrition and medical neglect.
They enlisted the help of local attorney Alina Ducharme.
CYS has basically said, we don't agree with your choice to take the child to a second doctor, and we should now get involved to make those decisions for you.
The Bolzans say they also learned there was a possibility Alex could be placed into foster care. That realization was too much for Connie to bear.
He would never survive. He would give up the will to live. I would give up the will to live.
In April, the couple was ordered to appear before a judge for the first part of their dependency hearing.
From my perspective, it didn't go as well for CYS as they anticipated. I thought we left that hearing with some confidence that this hearing would go, that this dependency proceeding would go well for my clients.
It's scheduled to continue later this summer. But just days after the first hearing, the Bolzans were met with a major setback.
So, what happened next? Part 2 of our story airs Thursday night at 11 o'clock.
Now, we don't mention the hospital by name, but you did talk to the hospital?
I did, and the Bolzans were very clear. They wanted the hospital to comment on why they made that initial call, but the hospital told me that due to federal laws on patient privacy, they're not illegally allowed to comment on the case.
So they essentially, they just can't defend these actions as to why they thought CYS could be called because of like HIPAA rules, things like that?
Yeah, that is exactly right. It's just as simple as HIPAA rules. They're not allowed to do it federally, so they cannot defend themselves. So this case is far from over, so we'll keep you posted on everything as it moves through the system. But again, part 2 airs Thursday night at 11 o'clock.
Stay on top of it for us, Brian.
Absolutely, we'll keep you posted.
Appreciate it.
Earlier this week, we introduced you to the Bolzans, a family from New Jersey now living in York County so their teenage son Alex could receive better medical care.
You see, Alex lives with autism as well as several other conditions, and the Bolzans say CYS is investigating them for potential medical neglect. The Bolzans say they've done nothing wrong. Here's Brian Sheehan with part 2 of their story.
Connie and Ray Bolzan have been under investigation by York County Children and Youth since earlier this year. Their 16-year-old son Alex has several medical conditions, including autism.
In our first story, we told you they rushed Alex to the hospital in February after he suffered a medical emergency. They were unhappy with the diagnosis and wanted to seek a second opinion. That's when they were charged with medical neglect. After hiring a local attorney to represent them at a dependency hearing in April, the Bolzans felt confident their case was going well.
But then a major setback.
York County Children and Youth have found that we are child abusers before there's even a final outcome of anything, and they have put us on the Pennsylvania State Registry now.
The Department of Human Services oversees CYS. An agency spokesperson tells Project PA the county CYS administrator and youth solicitor have the power to indicate an individual, or in this case, couple, as suspected child abusers after reviewing the child abuse report. The Bolzans' attorney, Alina Ducharme, says it's a completely separate process than the dependency hearing.
In my mind, if you're not making progress in the dependency area, then you can go around the second strategy and still punish the Bolzans for what you think they should or should not have been doing.
CYS is legally allowed to indicate the Bolzans, or anyone else for that matter, as potential child abusers before the judge makes a ruling on the dependency hearing. and the appeal process can be long and costly.
It seemed retaliatory, and it's frustrating that you think that you can make progress in this system, but it seems as though when you do make progress, there's always kind of a step back.
Ducharme says she told officials CYS made their case for medical neglect and abuse based on partial medical information since the Bolzans only moved to Pennsylvania late last year. Nearly 2 decades of Alex's medical records were back in New Jersey.
If there was abuse in the past, the numerous doctors and the primary care physician who's seen this child from a very young age would have picked up on it.
Connie and Ray say the indicated status is embarrassing and devastating.
Jarring and numbing and just what part of my world wasn't falling apart, just crushed.
They didn't get their way on the first hearing, and it's a continuance, and now they're going to ante up, make it harder.
While both hearings are still tied up in the legal system, Connie and Ray finally got Alex a second opinion a few weeks ago at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia.
It appears that there's a whole different diagnosis, that there is a different issue, not just the malnutrition and not the low weight gain.
And Alex is improving.
His spirit is his old self. He's much better.
Ray sees the difference in his son over the past few weeks. He can't help but think what would have happened if his wife didn't seek that second opinion.
A mom's instinct is irrefutable. You cannot fight a mother's instinct.
Connie and Ray, they saved their child's life by getting a second opinion.
They're hopeful they'll win their court battles later this summer. What happens after that, though, remains uncertain. But there's one thing Connie knows for sure.
The American people have to learn to get their voice back. And I'm going to take whatever CYS keeps bringing, because I know I've done nothing wrong. And I think it's time some people start pushing back.
This story is far from over. It's unique and very complex, but we've been in contact with the Bolzans throughout much of the process, and we'll keep you posted on their progress. For Project PA, I'm Brian Sheehan.
So heartbreaking.
Sue Sternberg is a grandmother harboring a lot of grief.
I used to feel so alone. I used to feel it was always directed to me, that there was no one else out there going through this. But I'm finding out more and more there's a lot of people out there going through the same thing, if not, more.
It's been 4 years since this little boy named Ashton played on these swings.
He was always a happy little boy.
Ashton's mother is Sternberg's daughter, and for the first years of his life,
I still would love to spend time with him.
this Berks County woman raised him as if he were her own. A gust of wind aside, these swings haven't moved since 2016.
I will fight for my grandson. No matter what I have to do to get him, I'm going to do it.
Like many of the Project PA stories we've shared, Sternberg's is long and involves complicated family dynamics. Her daughter's struggle with substance abuse issues for many years eventually got the attention of Berks County Children and Youth.
Because I wanted custody or adoption, I had to go through the kinship. So between caring and doing everything and working 2 jobs, I went to all the classes. I got my certificate that I passed the kinship. When I did that, then they wanted something more. They also had me go to counseling. I had to pay out of my pocket. She said I was a really good candidate to have Ashton, and very loving and caring. And she wrote this really long letter.
But Sternberg says despite the counselor's testimony, she also had to attend a drug and alcohol program as part of the custody process.
I guess because of my daughter, but yet it wasn't a meeting helping me with my grandchildren. It's not something that was helping me.
And you don't have a drug or alcohol problem?
No. Everything that I did and I passed, they tried to find something else.
Sternberg tells me she was on track to adopt Ashton, but 2 incidents ultimately prevented that from happening. The first in July 2013, after representatives from a treatment facility where her daughter was staying asked her to bring Ashton to come stay with his mother. She alleges the center got approval from CYS.
And they said they had it all set up with them. They had the paperwork, so I wouldn't think anything else but to go up there and see what it was about, because I thought it was all connected.
But apparently it wasn't, because as you see in these court documents, Berks County CYS says it wasn't aware of the arrangement with the facility until July 10th, 2013. At this point, Ashton had been living there with his mother for a few days. Sternberg says when the caseworker called her, he was livid.
He told me I'll never have my grandson after I did that. So we went to court, and the party that set this all up, there was miscommunication.
While the facility wouldn't confirm or deny this, citing HIPAA, it appears the court didn't have an issue with the placement. As you see here in this document, on August 29, 2013, the court transferred custody back to Ashton's mother while they both remained at the facility.
And they straightened it out in court that it wasn't my fault. You know, it had nothing to do with me, that I did exactly what I was supposed to do.
Sternberg fears had she not fought back in court, caseworkers would have permanently removed Ashton from her family's care. But months later, she was blindsided once again when Children and Youth permanently removed Ashton from her home. He hasn't lived there since that day.
Sometimes I think I keep this house in case he does remember us. I keep this ring set because I want him, maybe he'll remember it.
We continue the story of a Berks County woman who spent years fighting for custody of her grandson. Sue Sternberg alleges she nearly lost him over a miscommunication. Things were looking up in the months that followed until the day a caseworker visited her home. And now she is sharing her story with Project PA. Here's CBS 21's Brian Sheehan.
Sue Sternberg is a grandmother who hasn't seen her grandson Ashton in 4 years.
I still would love to spend time with him.
Her battle for custody began in 2013 as her daughter Christina, Ashton's mother, dealt with personal issues.
She was in and out of jail, so because I had him, they just left me, they left me have him.
Sternberg says the they in this equation is Berks County Children and Youth.
I always wanted to have another child and I couldn't, and Ashton would be it.
But she claims caseworkers and the courts made it difficult, requiring her to get mental evaluations, pass screenings, and take drug and alcohol classes since her daughter battled addiction. In July 2013, Sternberg says there was a mix-up over whether Ashton was allowed to live with Christina at a treatment facility. It was eventually sorted out, as these court documents show a judge granted Christina custody. But there were limitations to that custody order.
I was never told I couldn't be in the same room as her. She'd be up there giving Ashton a bath, which I was right there. He had like a pack and play here, and she slept on the sofa, and she would put him to sleep.
It was ultimately those actions that led CYS to permanently remove Ashton after a caseworker visited the home in January 2014.
Chrissy said, everything's going great, everything's working out. We were so happy. And the girl said, well, where does Ashton sleep? She said, the pack and play. Well, where do you sleep? Sofa. She went right to Children and Youth, reported it, and they went and took him from the babysitter that same day.
Ashton never returned home. And here's why. According to Berks County courts, Sternberg and her daughter violated the safety plan by leaving Ashton alone with Christina, even when Sue was in another room. She alleges she was told she could leave them alone as long as she was home.
I couldn't stand what they were doing to us. They were messing around with our feelings. It was an up and down roller coaster for all of us.
The courts also believed Sternberg minimized her daughter's addiction issues and enabled her behaviors. Sternberg denies those accusations.
My daughter and I, they thought we were really, really close, but we weren't close. But I was always there for her, and if it had to do with my grandchildren, I was there. And they called it enabling that I was always there.
Today, Sternberg believes Ashton lives in eastern Pennsylvania with his adoptive mother. He'll turn 8 in March. Another birthday Sternberg says she'll miss.
I work at Redner's and I see all these kids. I just fall in love with them. It's just my nature. I think of him then.
And if she saw him again,
I would go hug him, kiss him all over and tell him, you know, I'm your grandmother, had you forever, and we all love and miss you.
Sternberg says Christina blames herself for not getting permanent custody of her son. She does, however, have custody of at least one other child. Though both believe CYS overstepped their boundaries, taking Ashton over a chance Christina would inadvertently put him at risk and Sternberg wouldn't be there to protect him. They say that can happen in any family regardless of the situation. While Berks County CYS would not comment on this case directly, they tell me the safety of the child is first. For Project PA, I'm Brian Sheehan.